This is an option select, and it's one of the best ways to play defense in any fighting game. In Under Night, you can tech a throw by pressing the A and D buttons together, but that doesn't mean you only have to press A and D. We can add in some extra inputs to our AD press and even add in an anti-air so that we can tech throws, anti-air, and mash buttons all at the same time. The beauty of option selects are that you get to take a backseat, you press the buttons, and depending on what's happening in the game, a different outcome occurs. An option select is defined by the fighting game glossary as a situation where performing the same inputs can lead to several different outcomes depending on how the characters interact. The option select I'm showing here is 3C AD OS. We can already see by the inputs that this OS beats a standard throw situation. But what if the Mika chose to do Assault here? Or maybe he didn't even try to go for a mix-up and just press run up 2A. The first thing I want to address before we get started is 1AD OS. Now, 1AD OS is present in Under Night, but in UNI 2 it is being changed to give you a stand tech rather than a crouch shield. This is very important as 1AD was usually a fairly safe option to OS with aside from being hit by Assault. But now in UNI 2, since it will just give you a regular stand tech, you will be able to get assaulted over it and also get hit out of the throw startup. Because 1AD is getting drastically changed in UNI 2, I won't spend too much time covering it in this video. If you'd like to hear more discussion about 1AD getting changed in UNI 2, I'll link in the description below my podcast where I discussed with a few other players about why the 1AD changes are so big and their implications. Before we talk about each OS, I'd like to talk about TRM. TRM, or Throw Reject Miss, is a system in which you press AD to tech a throw, however no throw occurs, and because of that, you are then locked out from teching throws for a certain amount of time. You can see in this footage that no matter what OS I try to do, I will not be able to tech this throw because I previously attempted to tech the throw already during this block string. Even though gold throws in Under Night are usually techable, because it's a TRM lockout setup, it will not allow me to tech the throw. VOOS or 1ABCD input will be a very common OS in UNI 2. Because of 1AD getting removed and VO becoming faster from 20 frame start up to 14, it will be a much more common defensive option. It does however cost meter and will get punished if blocked. If you're below 30% HP, this input will turn into an IWEX OS. This can also be avoided by pressing ABC and then plinking into the D button a few frames later. VOS is great for teching throws, can beat frame traps, and also can sometimes anti-air assault if done quick enough. It does, however, lose to meaty A buttons as the opponent will have time to recover and block, although that may or may not be true in UNI 2 due to the new speed of VO, and will also lose to your opponent simply blocking and baiting the VO. 3CAD or 3CAD is a very strong OS present in UNI, and will also be present in UNI 2. This OS is great for characters who have a 3C anti-air, however some characters' 3Cs are still too slow and are not the best to be used. Characters with slow 3Cs may include Byakuya and Landrekia, although Landrekia's 3C might be getting quicker in UNI 2. Some of the characters with strong enough 3Cs to make use of this include Eltnum, Seth, and Nanase. Some characters like Enkidu and Lene can do similar OSs with their force functions, however the on-block situation is not as strong as with 3Cs. Make sure when you're doing this FFOS input that you're not doing the BCAD too fast, otherwise it will give you VO instead of an FF. 3CAD is great for teching throws, will anti-air assaults leading to big damage, and also waiting. If your opponent runs up and waits for you to press 3C, they will simply block the 3C and you will get to take your turn on block. The big damage of the assault and also being able to take your turn on block is what makes 3COD a very strong OS. In order to beat 3CAD, you're aiming to either make the 3C whiff or to hit the startup of your opponent's 3C for a big counter hit combo. If you see your opponent pressing 3C when you're close up on defense, they're probably doing 3CAD OS. 2AD OS is similar to 3CAD but is not anti-air. 2AD is an OS that can be used by every member of the cast and is great against players who are attempting to bait a VO OS or a DP. This OS is great for teching throws, will beat delay throws as well as it'll hit an opponent out of their throw startup. It can be used to take your turn against a patient opponent and also beats big delay buttons. In some situations where maybe a 3C would get counter hit, a 2AD might not. 2AD does however lose to assaults, and while you won't get a counter hit combo for assaulting over their 2A, you will hit them during the recovery of their 2A, allowing for a punish. It can also be beaten the same way a 3CAD can be beaten by hitting the startup of the 2A, but because of the A buttons being faster, it is usually much harder. 171 AD OS is an OS that puts you in the air and will air shield any assault normals. This is an OS that characters without a 3C or force function anti-air can do in order to beat assaults. After shielding the air normal, the character on defense can use their own air normal to take their turn or even punish. Some characters, however, do not have big enough air normals and cannot punish or even maybe take their turn and will simply reset the neutral. If your 171 AD whiffs and you're stuck in the air after air shielding, you can usually press a falling button to cover your landing, or some characters with double jumps can jump afterwards. Akatsuki and Elnam are unique in this scenario as their 171 AD will give them an air throw. Air throw is generally considered weaker than 171 AD, as while the reward is pretty strong, you are in full recovery before you land. 171 AD is obviously great for taking throws and beating assaults, and due to being able to perform the input so quickly, can often be done later into a tech window, meaning it can beat frame traps whereas other OSs would normally lose. You can beat an opponent doing 171 AD by running up and baiting them and punishing them before they can stop air shielding. You want to try to hit your opponent before they can recover from the shield, as they will be able to act and could save themselves. If your opponent is not the best at doing 171 AD, or perhaps playing on a levered controller instead of leverless, the gap between the 1-7 and 1 may be bigger, meaning that they can get hit by lows. Whenever you see your opponent doing an up-back shield, they are most likely doing this OS. If you're really struggling to figure out what OS your opponent is using, you can always fall back on TRM, or if you really can't figure it out, you can simply dash up and do nothing. And sitting in front of them, right in throw range, will get them to panic and respond with some sort of OS, and you'll be able to figure out what OS they're trying to do. They're not guaranteed to actually show you an OS and try to tech a throw, because maybe it's a situation where they'd rather take the throw, but it can really be useful in casuals, for example, if you're really struggling to figure out what your opponent is doing on defense. It's not necessarily something I'd recommend going for in a tournament set, but if you're playing casuals and really just trying to improve and better understand the game, it's not a bad idea to do every once in a while. As silly as this may sound, you want to go for an OS when you really think your opponent is going to try and throw you. You want to be aware of things like the grid cycle and the life lead situation for whether or not you really need to go for an option select. If you really do feel that your opponent is going to try and throw you, but you're not sure if they will or not, do an option select that covers their most common options. If your opponent isn't showing assault at all when they try to run up and throw you, then there's no need to try to go for a 3CAD or an anti-air OS. Use the OS that is right for the situation, and you'll be able to OS a lot safer. OSs do cover a lot of options, but they are committal, and if called out, are very rewarding for your opponent. So make sure when you're playing, you keep in mind these situations, and you really question if it's worth committing to beat all these different options when you could also simply just take the throw. Another important aspect about choosing window OS is the timing. The throw tech window in UNI is 14 frames, which compared to a lot of fighting games is pretty huge. When you're OSing, it's best to aim for the end of the tech window to tech the throw, as delaying your OS more will make it safer. Seasoned UNI players will easily be able to tell when a throw is teched early into the tech window or late, and even that small amount of information can be useful when trying to open up your opponent next time. So make sure that when you're OSing, you're doing it late into the window, and if your opponent's doing it late, keep in mind their timings and try to abuse those timings to the best of your ability. Another important aspect of option selecting is rotating your OSs. For example, if you've been doing 171 AD, your opponent gets a read and starts reading your upbacks, then they're just going to wait for you to upback and then punish your shield. This is when it would be good to swap to an OS like 2 AD, which would then allow you to take your turn on defense and still tech a throw. In this video, I covered the main OSs that we see every day in the game. There are some more niche OSs like Backdash OS that might get some more use in UNI 2, also might be an OS with the new roll mechanic. We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving it a like, and if you want to stay tuned with big UNI content, be sure to subscribe. Would really appreciate it. Oh yeah, baby!